My father raised his glass mid-toast and said it loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. We always thought our daughter could have done a little better. Laughter rippled through the crowd, easy and careless the way cruelty often sounds at parties. 3 feet away Micah stood holding 2 champagne glasses, one meant for me, his face carefully neutral in a way I'd come to recognize as practiced patience. I wasn't embarrassed for him. I was embarrassed for my father standing there so confident in his joke, so sure of the room he thought he controlled, with absolutely no idea who was about to walk through that gate. But to understand why I wasn't panicking, why I could feel something almost like calm settling into my chest, you need to know what Micah had been building for the last 3 years, completely under my family's radar. My name is Renata, I'm 29, and I've spent most of my life in Charlotte learning exactly how my family measures a person's worth. By title, by salary, by the kind of car parked in the driveway. My father built his identity around being a regional VP, the kind of man who introduced himself by his job title before his name. My mother measured everything by appearances, how a wedding looked, how a resume read, how a son-in-law's handshake felt to strangers at a party. My older brother, a lawyer, rarely let 5 minutes pass without reminding everyone what firm he worked for. Then there was Micah. 31, quiet, wearing the same rotation of 3 grey sweaters no matter the season, running a small logistics software company out of a converted garage he called the office, without a hint of irony. To my family that translated into one word: unemployed, or close enough to it that they never bothered asking questions. Months before the engagement party, Micah mentioned over dinner that his company had signed a promising new client, something bigger than anything they'd landed before. My mother nodded politely and changed the subject to centerpiece colors. My father didn't even look up from his phone. Nobody asked what the client was or what promising meant or why. Micah's eyes had lit up saying IT.so when my mother insisted on inviting everyone who matters to our engagement party, including my father's CEO, a man named Daniel Whitmore, whom my father had spent the entire week name-dropping to anyone who'd listen. Nobody in my family paused to wonder if Micah might already know exactly who that was. The toast started the way most of my father's toasts did, with him enjoying the sound of his own voice a little too much. We were hoping for a doctor, maybe an engineer, he said, raising his glass higher, playing to the crowd like he was on stage. But I guess love doesn't always make the smart choice, does it? The laughter came easy, the kind that ripples through a backyard full of people who've had 2 glasses of wine and no reason to think twice about what they're laughing at. My brother, never one to let a moment like this pass without adding his own commentary, leaned toward the closest table and said, just loud enough, at least he's a nice nobody. A few chuckles followed, quieter, the kind people give when they're not sure if they should. I looked at Micah. He didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even glance my way for reassurance. He simply set his champagne glass down on the table beside him, smiled the same polite smile he always wore at these family functions, and said absolutely nothing. I felt my face go hot, a fury climbing up my throat that I refused to let show. Not because I needed to defend him, Micah had never once needed defending, but because I was watching my father humiliate a man he understood nothing about in a room full of people who understood even less. What none of them knew, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that the CEO my father had spent the entire week bragging about inviting was already walking through the front gate. Daniel Whitmore arrived exactly the way my father had promised he would, crisp navy blazer, easy smile, the kind of presence that made people straighten up without realizing they were doing it. My father spotted him first and practically glided across the lawn to shake his hand, already mid-sentence about how thrilled he was to have him here. I watched Whitmore's eyes move across the party the way people do when they are being polite but not particularly invested, scanning faces, nodding at introductions he'd forget in an hour. Then his gaze landed on Micah. He stopped, not a pause, not a beat, a full stop, the kind of stillness that happens when someone's brain is working faster than their expression can keep up with. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, months earlier, in a grainy photo Micah sent me from a supply chain conference in Atlanta, standing beside a man he described only as someone important I talked shop with for 20 minutes. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. For the next 20 minutes, while my father worked the room retelling the same tired joke about love not making the smart choice, I watched Daniel Whitmore make his way slowly toward us, stopping every few feet to shake another hand, his eyes flicking back toward Micah each time like he was confirming something to himself. My mother breezed past with a tray of refilled wine glasses, oblivious, asking a cousin if the florist had used the right shade of blush for the centerpieces. My brother was somewhere near the dessert table, already recounting his nobody joke to someone who hadn't heard it the first time. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Elena, Micah's business partner, confirmed this morning, Whitmore Logistics renewed for another year. $400,000 on top of the original contract. Tell Micah congrats when you see him. I looked up. Whitmore was 6 feet away now, weaving through the crowd with quiet purpose, his attention locked entirely on my fiancé. I didn't say a word to my family. I simply watched, feeling something settle in my chest that wasn't panic anymore. It was anticipation, quiet and certain, the feeling of watching a truth arrive exactly on time. My father reached out his hand first, already mid-introduction. Daniel, I want you to meet my daughter's fiancé. Whitmore walked straight past it. He moved toward Micah, instead extending his own hand with a kind of urgency that didn't match the casual backyard setting at all. You're the reason my board didn't fire me last quarter, he said, gripping Micah's hand like he was greeting someone he'd been trying to track down for weeks. The backyard went quiet in the particular way a room does when it senses something has shifted but hasn't caught up. My father's outstretched hand hung there for a second too long before he lowered it, his expression flickering between confusion and the beginning of something closer to alarm. He'd spent all week building up this introduction, imagining himself as the bridge between his impressive boss and his unremarkable future son-in-law. Instead, he was standing off to the side, watching his CEO look at Micah the way people look at someone whose name they've said out loud in meetings for months. I'm sorry, my father said, forcing a laugh that came out thin. I don't think I follow. Whitmore didn't look away from Micah. Your daughter's fiancé built the logistics platform that flagged our shipping delays before they cost us another $2 million last quarter. I only know his face because I spent an hour on a video call with him, personally thanking him for it. Then he turned to the rest of the party, my mother frozen mid-pour, my brother's mouth still slightly open from whatever sentence he'd been in the middle of, and asked loud enough for everyone near the tables to hear. Does anyone here actually know that this man runs the logistics platform half our supply chain depends on? Nobody answered. The laughter from 10 minutes earlier, the easy, careless kind that had rippled through the yard at Micah's expense, was gone, completely replaced by a silence so total I could hear the ice shifting in someone's drink. My father's face moved through several expressions in the span of a few seconds. Confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like dawning horror as he began doing the math on every dismissive comment he'd made about Micah for the past 2 years. My brother, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, said nothing at all. I reached for Micah's free hand and held it, feeling how steady he still was, exactly the way he'd been for the last 20 minutes. Like he'd known all along this moment would eventually arrive and had simply been waiting patiently for everyone else to catch up. The rest of the night unfolded quietly in the way things do after a room realizes it misjudged someone. My father hovered near us for the remainder of the party, oddly deferential, refilling Micah's drink himself, at one point laughing a beat too hard at things that weren't especially funny. At one point he leaned in and said, "You know, I was just teasing earlier, right?" All in good fun, the words coming out fast like he needed to say them before anyone else brought it up first. My brother didn't attempt anything close to an apology. He simply drifted toward the far side of the yard for the rest of the evening, suddenly very interested in conversations that kept him at a safe distance from us, his earlier joke about a nice nobody apparently no longer worth repeating. I didn't gloat. I didn't ask my father to explain himself or demand my brother acknowledge what he'd said. I just took Micah's hand, thanked a few guests for coming, and steered every conversation gently away from the moment, refusing to let it become the spectacle my family clearly feared it might. Later that night, driving home with the windows cracked and the party noise finally behind us, Micah and I laughed softly about the whole thing: the frozen handshake, my father's rebranded joke, my brother's sudden disappearance. "I'm proud of you," I told him, and I meant it. Not because of anything Whitmore had said in that yard, but because Micah had never once needed him to say it. Looking back, I think about how long I let my family's definitions decide what counted as success. The titles, the salaries, the right kind of handshake at the right kind of party. It took a stranger walking through a backyard gate to show me what I should have known all along: worth was never theirs to assign. The people who mock quiet competence are usually the ones least equipped to recognize it when it's standing right in front of them. I still wonder sometimes if I should have said something the moment my father made that joke, or my brother added his. Would you have stayed silent through that toast or spoken up right then? I don't know if there's a right answer. What I do know is that the goal was never to humble my family that night. It wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong or savoring the look on my father's face. It was simply about no longer needing their approval to know what I already understood. My father spent years teaching me what success should look like. That night, without saying a single word, Micah taught the whole room what it actually was.